Today, on episode 61 of Rail Talk, we break down the UK equine lab kerfuffle with leading legal mind Alan Foreman, recap the Grade 1 action from Woodbine over the weekend, look forward to the Pennsylvania Derby card, and of course, relive the wedding of the century. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds, and I had such a ball. It honestly was the best day of my life on Saturday when Meg and I finally tied the knot. I'm still riding a high from that. And even it was like, 4 or 5 days ago. Now I'm always high to do this show, but this is a natural high, John.
Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable. And Joe, I'm so happy for you guys. So proud of you both. I really wish I could have been there. I saw even like Cy the dog made it there, for goodness sake. He had an appearance, which was actually more than an appearance. He was there for the whole time, which was awesome. The thing that I was happiest about, aside from the fact that you guys made it official and are now husband and wife, is that you were sporting the seasonal collection of DJ Stable outerwear with your suit. I don't know if you even realized it, Joe, but our colors were represented at your wedding. So you can write that suit off as a business expense, according to Len Green.
Don't let Terry see that. I was supposed to be wearing West Point colors. That's awesome.
Anyway, I couldn't think of a better person as the spokesmodel for the DJ Stable winter collection. The formal winter collection.
Absolutely. I'm free to wear anybody's gear at any time. Just send it to me, as Emerald Downs will tell you. Let's start the show. All right, so this was the big story of the week. And just off the top, I'm going to do something I don't usually do on this show and not talk so much, because with the wedding and with Keeneland in September, I'm a little bit out of the loop. So I'm going to let John take the lead on most of these topics. He's been a little bit more clued in than I am. And I'm just going to be your setup man, John, for most of this show. I hope you're okay with that.
Well, I mean, it colored me surprised. I'm a little not ready to handle this, but be that as it may, Joe, I will try to do my best Joe Bianca impression. And you know what? At the end of the show, I will probably have a greater appreciation for everything that you do, buddy.
I hope so. I also hope it's better than your previous Joe Bianca impression. That was that wasn't much. But this was the big story of the past week. I'm quoting from Natalie Voss's story in the Pollock Report. She always does a great job breaking down these stories. 2 reports released September 17th by the Horse Racing Integrity and Welfare Unit and the University of Kentucky on the ongoing investigations into the university's equine analytical chemistry lab were packed full of startling revelations. There was an investigation that HISA undertook into that lab, which is a pretty prominent lab in this industry. Both reports focused on the many alleged deficiencies of lab director Dr. Scott Stanley and raised broad, serious questions about the integrity of his operation. Officials say Stanley is now also under investigation by federal law enforcement authorities. And that the case has been referred to the University of Kentucky Police. In February, HIWU and the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority stopped sending samples to the UK lab for analysis after being alerted to personnel issues there. HIWU subsequently discovered that Stanley had charged them for a test he hadn't actually performed and alerted the university to this finding. The University of Kentucky, which was already looking into human resources issues with Stanley, then opened its own parallel investigations into the lab's activities. Basically, then there was like a lack of follow-up, I think, in terms of samples that were flagged for potentially having banned substances in them that they did not do, and then still charged HIWU anyway for them. I think there were like 90 something of them. But John, you really did the deep research on this story. Tell me what were like the big glaring takeaways from it.
Well, there were a bunch, Joe. So sit back, get your popcorn and get ready. And again, a lot of this is being taken from the Natalie Voss article, who's editor in chief of the Pollock Report. I actually reached out to Natalie and I was so impressed with what she did, how she broke down this 9-page report that was issued by HIWU. And so kudos to her, because she gave me a lot of these talking points. But basically, Joe, what it comes down to is Dr. Scott Stanley was in charge of one of the 6 or 7 designated labs that being utilized by HISA and HIWU. And for all intents and purposes, he was not doing his job. And he was not doing his job so much so that there were incorrect samples that were being tested. There were samples that were coming up as positives that he allegedly, again, we're not sure yet, but he allegedly was looking the other way and not splitting them for a split sample. There were others that, where he was telling HISA, HIWU that he was doing the actual investigation and lab reports, and wasn't really doing them. As a matter of fact, there's a quote in here that talks about the biggest problem, certainly, that although he claimed he was screening samples for EPO, he wasn't, because the machine he would have had to have used for the testing was inoperable, a fact that wasn't even communicated to HIWU. So he was saying he was doing some of these screenings, but in fact, like, he didn't have the capability to do the screenings. He also had access, allegedly, to some of the IT work that was going on, so he could log in and change answers as far as what some of the split samples were showing, whether positive or negative, and could do it anonymously. And other people within his organization could also log in anonymously and do the same thing. So kerfuffle that you used at the top of the show is a really good sentiment. I mean, it was a shit show, quite frankly, for a lot of it, and. Then there's also, Joe, some other issues as far as were there conflicts of interest from a personal standpoint. Dr. Scott Stanley, may or may not have been having a personal relationship with one of the employees that was there, who subsequently was also, by the way, the daughter was a former trainer and the daughter of an existing trainer, from Florida. And, oh, by the way, the UK lab was in charge of getting the Florida samples. So there was a lot of smoke, you would say, that could be fired down the road, that HISA HIWU were concerned about, the independent regulators were concerned about, and now UK is concerned about, quite frankly, because they're he's basically tarnishing their good name with regard to testing and screening. So there's a lot going on here. Again, none of it yet is concrete as far as, did he break the law? Did he do anything immoral or inappropriate with regard to an HR standpoint? But there's a lot of dots that are being connected. So much so that UK themselves has said Dr. Scott Stanley, who is a tenured employee here, is being terminated. So that they must have a lot of evidence on it to go in that direction after tenuring an employee, for that long of a period of time. So a lot to unpack. I'm so happy that we're going to have Alan Foreman on in a few minutes to kind of address some of these issues and concerns. But Joe, one of the big things that I'm taking away from this personally is this is exactly why you have protocols in place to not only test but cross check certain samples and certain parts of the process in order to make sure that the testing center is doing exactly what it's doing. So yeah, it's unfortunate that a lab that HISA HIWU employed and was utilizing to screen samples is coming up with all of these issues, but that's exactly why they have a system in place. So that way, when it's being done and it's being done incorrectly, it's getting recognized immediately. That's a lot. I mean, there's other stuff about, whether or not Scott Stanley knew that the jig was up, and that's why he was being so combative towards the other employees, towards HIWU HISA, as far as, getting answers to them on a timely basis and things like that. I think the guy's in a bad way right now, and unfortunately, he kind of did it to himself.
Yeah, this is probably a better question for Alan Foreman, but I just wonder, like, how much of this is one rogue actor and how much of this is rotten infrastructure in the UK lab. Like, I'm asking that question legitimately and with an open mind, because I don't know. In a lot of these cases, a lot of times when there's a big scandal, everybody tries to throw like the one person who was the head of it under the bus,
right?
And then kind of just try to move on a little bit. So I'm curious as to whether he had people who kind of protected him or kept some of this stuff under wraps along the way, or if he truly was a rogue actor and because he was powerful within the organization and within the lab that he kind of just had his own way. So I'm really curious about that. HISA did a 6-month-long investigation into this. And again, like this, it's a different topic, but it's similar to me to the Parks turf course we were talking about last week. Who else would have done this?
Right.
Who else in the industry would have done this and gotten to this point where now he's being referred for federal charges potentially? Like, this is why you need cops on the beat. And just to reiterate some of what John said, I'm reading from the HISA press release here. Key findings of the 6-month-long investigation include The lab's failure to comply with mandatory testing specifications and instructions, including its standard operating procedures and sample analysis methods.
Is that important, Joe? Is that important for a lab to do?
I'm no scientist. I'm no scientician. But I think that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Also,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're good. They misrepresented, and John mentioned this, they misrepresented both their ability to test for specific substances, including EPO, and the completion of analysis for certain substances on specific samples. And at the direction of Dr. Scott Stanley, the laboratory failed to perform confirmatory analysis on 91 samples whose initial screening showed the potential presence of a prohibited substance and therefore required follow-up, instead reporting the samples as negative. Right. That's a big blaring
Yep.
It really does make you question the integrity of the entire lab. And I don't want to do that. I'm sure there are plenty of great scientists there who are trying to do the right thing, but man, is that scary, especially in this era where we're really trying to crack down and make sure that things are adjudicated correctly and that we have a clean sport and a level playing field. This is going to be tough to climb out of this hole from, but that's why I'm happy to talk to Alan Foreman and see, if he thinks this was an institutional thing or a guy in charge who shouldn't have been in charge screwing shit up. So we are so thrilled to bring on this next guest to explain some of the legal ramifications of the story we talked about in the opening segment. He's the CEO of the Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association, one of the leading legal minds in the business. Alan Foreman, welcome to the show.
Gentlemen, thank you. Happy to be here.
We're so glad to have you, and you do a great service, I think, when these kind of stories break and jump on podcasts and explain to us laymen what's going on in the business. So obviously, I'm sure you dove into the UK lab story a little bit. John has a little bit better grasp on this than I do, but my main question and the main takeaway for me is just from your perspective, is this a one rogue actor kind of screwing things up for the entire lab? Does it seem to you more like an institutional problem? What's your read on that?
No, it comes from the top, because the director of the laboratory is responsible for the activities, conduct, compliance with protocols, and how that laboratory operates. I mean, it's a sad story, but it's a good news story for the industry, actually, notwithstanding that we have a lab that has to shut down and that we have to step in and get it right. I spoke at the Jockey Club Roundtable in 2009, and I called for the industry to take a fresh look at its entire drug testing program, laboratory accreditation, which did not exist at the time. If you go back 15 years, we didn't have an accreditation program. I said, we need to get our labs accredited. We need to upgrade the quality of the personnel who are doing it. We have to give confidence both to the industry and to the betting public that we are doing everything we can to ensure the integrity of the sport and the safety and welfare of the horse. And so we worked very hard to develop an accreditation program for our laboratories, which led to the creation of the RMTC code, which at the time, and I still believe, is the best in the industry. I mean, the international laboratory did not have a code such as we had developed for the horse racing industry here. The key is, though, that you've got to be able to test your laboratories, and you have to have the confidence on an ongoing basis that the laboratories can do what you want them to do, and the laboratories can do what they say they can do. And you need to have a strict program to test them. Now, in this particular instance, there was a whistleblower. There were concerns from one of the other laboratories about their interactions with this laboratory. And then when HISA went in to actually take a look at this program, they found that it was non-compliant in so many ways that it had to be shut down immediately. And it's sad from the standpoint that I've known Scott Stanley for 4 decades and have always regarded him as one of the brightest of members of our scientific community. He's not only a recognized equine toxicologist, but he's also a pharmacologist. And having both of those skill sets in the laboratory is very difficult to find. But what happened in this laboratory is untenable. The good news is that we have a process in place to identify this, to root it out, and to fix it. And for the best interest of the industry to know that that laboratory was not compliant and will not operate until it is compliant and can meet the standards and protocols is critically important. And that's one of the good things about this new HISA program, is that there is somebody looking at these supposedly qualified laboratories to ensure that they are, in fact, following protocols, even to the extent that they went in and to the extent that there were concerns about samples that had not been properly tested or samples that may have produced either false negatives or false positives. HISA was able to go in and test every one of those samples to ensure that there were no corrupt samples, that the integrity of the sport had not been damaged, and that there can be assurances going forward that, number one, the samples are going to laboratories that are compliant, but that before this lab can get up and running and do testing for our industry, that they're going to be compliant with protocols. So it just shows that this new HISA program, which regulates our laboratories, is working.
And Alan, you bring up some excellent points that it's important to be able to cross-check and test and see exactly what our what our labs are doing to ensure the integrity of them. Because I'm sure that there are trainers and owners out there right now who may have had a positive sample, especially if the sample was sent to Kentucky, and they may be questioning whether or not the results are accurate. What can you say to those about those tests?
Well, first of all, with respect to a trainer who gets notice of a positive test, he or she does have the opportunity to get the B sample tested. That sample goes to another RMTC code and HISA-approved laboratory for testing the same sample to see if, in fact, the drug that reported was in the sample. So that's one of the fallbacks. The other thing that the industry does, that HISA does, is we test these laboratories on a regular basis, sending them samples that are included with other samples that go to the laboratory, and they have to test them to determine if they can find what is in that sample. HISA knows what's in the sample. The RMTC knows what's in the sample, but the laboratory doesn't. And they are tested frequently to determine whether or not they have the protocols, the standards, and the ability to identify those. And, we recently had a RMTC code accredited laboratory doing testing for HISA that failed these routine tests, these routine scrutinies. And as a result, their accreditation was suspended. And until they take corrective action and can demonstrate that they are able to not only meet the standards and protocols, but can identify samples are sent to them, they're not going to be doing testing for our industry. And so that's something that we're doing on an ongoing basis and will continue to do so to ensure the integrity of our testing process. So there are, and thirdly, when a trainer has a positive test, you can look at the analytical data. You do need an expert to look at it to ensure that they did follow the protocols, that the sample wasn't tampered with, that the sample was properly tested, that the result reported by the laboratory was correct. And you can look at it's extensive data, but you can look at it, and an expert looking at those can determine whether or not they followed standard protocols or not. And I'm sure that HISA looks and HIWU look at that data before they proceed with a case to determine whether or not there's anything that's questionable with respect to the sample. So I think that the bottom line is, I think the Horsemen can take comfort, and I think the industry can take comfort that there is a mechanism in place that ensures the integrity of the testing process. That's the most important take from this.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's a scandal, but the fact that there was even an investigative process to begin with to produce this scandal, I think, is what you're saying, that's a positive step for the industry, because a lot of this stuff probably would have gone ignored in previous, or not even been reported in previous eras. I wanted to switch gears to another story that broke last week. There was a veterinarian in Illinois who filed a lawsuit in federal court alleging that Hawthorne and other officials there allowed horses they knew to be sick, injured, or lame to run in races over a 2-year period. In approximately 75 racing dates, Hawthorne officials deny the allegations. Illinois Racing Board said it found no evidence to support the allegations, but the plaintiff, who's Dr. Christine Tuma, said that defendants intentionally violated federal and state laws when they certified lame and sick horses to race while abusing the animals in their care and defrauding the betting public. Two-part question. First, your lawyer hat on, do you think there's any merit to this suit from what you've read? Second, put your horseman's hat on. There is a lot of push and pull now in the industry with vets having more power and more autonomy to scratch horses. Here at West Point, we've had some horses scratch who had nothing wrong with them, but you kind of got to just play by the rules. The increased scrutiny overall is a good thing. So on the legal side, does this have merit? And on the horseman's side, do you think that we can reach a point where vets have a little bit too much power?
Well, with respect to the lawsuit itself, I only know what I read. I think it was an article in TDN. I know nothing more about it. It seems to me to be a novel approach to be going into federal court and bringing this action under what is the federal racketeering statute that was, as I think reported in the article, originally used to go after mob bosses, but has obviously gone beyond that. I mean, it was used in the prosecution of Donald Trump in New York. And I think there is a ultimate question of whether or not this statute was created for this purpose. I mean, they're making allegations of a connection to betting and to nefarious conduct, fraud. I mean, I have a hard time believing that the conduct for which she complains, there's more to this story, obviously, than meets the eye. She says she complained to federal regulators. I assume she's talking about HISA because the safety program was in place. You have to be very impressed with the people at HISA, Jen Durenberger, Ann McGovern, and their team in looking at these kinds of allegations, this situation. I will tell you that right now the industry has been erring on the side of the safety and welfare of the horse. And there's been a lot of complaints about horses being scratched unnecessarily, but we don't have a margin of error. We haven't had a margin of error. The single most important story coming out of this industry, in my opinion, right now, is the massive reduction in the fatality rate that's occurred in the past year. And I think it's occurred for two reasons. Number one is we have a mandated safety program that the Mid-Atlantic had a terrific safety program. We couldn't mandate it by law. California had a terrific program. Kentucky, it's now a national program, and the standards are tough. We've obviously are taking greater scrutiny of the condition of our horses. And there are horses where the veterinarians are erring on the side of caution. And that can create some heartburn for owners who are waiting to get a horse into a race or trainers who believe the horse is okay. But that is, that's what's happening right now. And do I think it will relax? Maybe to some extent, because I think what they want is uniformity among the veterinarians in the methodologies that they're using to scratch horses. Why is a horse scratched in one place but not scratched in another? Is it dependent upon the subject rather than the objective standards of the veterinarian looking at the horse? But at the end of the day, the single most important story is that our fatality and breakdown rate is really significantly coming down. And I think the other reason for that is, some horsemen may disagree, but I'm hearing it more and more, backing out the administration of therapeutic medications from what was 24 hours to 48 hours and now even a longer period of time is giving the veterinarians a better opportunity to examine these horses to make sure that they don't have something that would cause that horse not to, be put in the starting gate. And I think it's causing the horsemen to take a greater look at and do a better job of training their horses. And I come from the horseman side of the business, but I'm hearing a lot of that. And I just think the combination of the safety program and backing out the use of these medications is a contributing factor to this reduced fatality rate, which is so critical to our future.
No, excellent points, Alan. And you look at the numbers year over year of the improvement of safety, and HISA is a big part of that. Obviously, that Joe and I talk about that all the time. But especially in stark contrast to the states that aren't following HISA, and that leads me to my question about the constitutionality of HISA. If you can explain it, like dumb it down so I can understand, as far as Fifth Circuit, Sixth Circuit, Supreme Court, where are we right now, and what should people be listening for as far as the higher courts?
So we're on the verge of the constitutionality of HISA going to the United States Supreme Court. It's inevitable. I think the question right now is, because we're waiting for the Fifth Circuit to issue its mandate, will its mandate limit the scope of its ruling? And in the Fifth Circuit, they determined that HISA was constitutional in every respect except for its enforcement power. And you need to remember that the Fifth Circuit has always been problematic with respect to the constitutionality of HISA. They originally deemed it to be unconstitutional. Congress went back, made the fix that the Fifth Circuit has suggested needed to be made, and yet it comes back to the Fifth Circuit and they continue to reject it. They're hostile to HISA. And in this instance, they didn't disagree with the Sixth Circuit, including Kentucky, where the court ruled that the new language did render it constitutional. They found it unconstitutional as to the Federal Trade Commission's oversight of the enforcement arm and the enforcement powers of HISA. So that is the issue that's going to go to the Supreme Court. Now, the question is, will they issue an injunction, so to speak, where its application will only apply to the states covered by the Fifth Circuit, Louisiana, Texas, or will they issue a national injunction, in which case it would cripple HISA across the board? What HISA attempted to do over the past week was to seek permission to go to the Supreme Court, get permission for the Supreme Court to take the case so that they wouldn't issue, in my opinion, a national mandate. And the Fifth Circuit said, no way, we're going to rule. And then if you want to go to the Supreme Court, you can go to the Supreme Court. And so the question now is, what will the Fifth Circuit do? I believe if they issue a national mandate, HISA will go to the Supreme Court immediately and ask for a stay. So there's a lot of jockeying going on right now. And the question is, how quickly will it get to the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court's new term starts in a few weeks. Will go till June. Conventional wisdom is if they can get the case to the court now, we would have a ruling by next summer. If not, it gets delayed further. And so it's complicated, but I think that both sides are starting to gear up for the fight before the Supreme Court. And we will, conceivably we'll know this time next year, and it's the whole ball of wax. I mean, there's going to be no more litigation after this. It's either constitutional or it's not constitutional. And if it's not, will the powers that be able to go back to Congress in this atmosphere? Mitch McConnell will not be the majority leader, or he won't be the minority leader. He will not be in power. He helped to push it through. Chuck Schumer may or may not be majority leader. If the Republicans take the Senate, somebody else will. So who knows how the politics of this will work going forward. It's going to be a real challenge for the industry.
Yeah, no, I was hoping that you would hold our hands and tell us it's going to be okay, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. And
you know what? When you hear the argument before the Supreme Court, you'll get a pretty good sense. I think that many people feel that three of the justices are hostile to the administrative state. The others aren't. Kavanaugh got the appeal from the Sixth Circuit, the appeal from the losing side that wanted a stay, and they wanted to go to the Supreme Court, wanted to stay. They didn't get it. So the sense is maybe Kavanaugh is sympathetic to HISA. You expect probably the liberal justices will. Who knows where John Roberts is, and who knows where Justice Barrett is. Is that Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas will be hostile, and maybe no votes, but maybe no more than three. So
yeah, with this Supreme Court, I find it hard to believe that in the majority they're going to back a regulatory agency. I cannot see that happening, but hopefully I'm wrong. We'll see. Last question from me. You do such a service for the industry. You're obviously such a passionate guy and a smart guy, and you've had a great influence in the business. I think one of the things that you've done in the past year or so that on paper at least was really important and really necessary was one of the big criticisms of HISA when it first started making rulings was that a lot of trainers who had rulings levied against them felt kind of steamrolled and as if they did not have a real say in the legal process or the appeals process. You offered yourself up to be an ombudsman for HISA and to work between the two sides to come up with a more fleshed out, more fair process. My first question is, have people been taking advantage of it? And secondly, have you been seeing better, more satisfying results for the people who are, have been caught with alleged illegal substances through that process?
So I talk to horsemen every day, sometimes more than others. Sometimes the cases are more difficult than others. What I essentially do is help horsemen navigate the process. They get this 11-page letter from HISA, from HIWU that is, it's daunting, and they're not going to sit and read through it. So they're told to call me. They call me. I help them to understand the process, how to navigate the process, what to do, whether they should seek legal assistance, whether I can help them with pro bono legal assistance, free legal assistance, whether I can help them to fashion their response to HIWU, whether they should request the B sample. I mean, there are any number of things I do to help them. It's confidential. They don't get charged for my services, and I'm happy to do it. In the more difficult banned substance cases, yeah, it's a real challenge. Fortunately, we're not seeing many of those. In response to your second point, the answer is yes, there are changes being made, and it's not an easy process. I advocate for Horsemen, and I advocate for change, as many others are doing. But we have seen change. You see it in the fact that a lot of the banned substances have been these drugs of human substance abuse that are finding their way into horses. Originally, that was a 2-year suspension and a $25,000 fine. We've been able to bring that down now to a rule before the Federal Trade Commission that would have a maximum penalty of 60 days, but you can mitigate that down. I've gotten them to look at any number of issues that there's other changes coming. And, we don't talk about it. You don't see it. I see it in talking to horsemen's groups. I see it talking to horsemen. I have the ability to talk to HIWU. I have the ability to talk to HISA. We do it respectfully. There's a process in place with committees and lots of people with differing points of view. They don't always agree with what I have to say. But but the system is working. If there's a problem, it's that the Federal Trade Commission is taking so long to approve the changes that we want. Right. I mean, we can't implement the changes. We thought this was going to be, we being the industry, I'm not a spokesman for HISA or HIWU, but the theory behind this, the thinking behind this was that it would expedite a process that what people thought before HISA was a drawn-out process. You couldn't get all the jurisdictions involved. It took too long to adopt rules. And now we've got a process that isn't moving quickly as it comes to rulemaking. And we have to answer to the Federal Trade Commission, and we have to wait for them to decide when they want to approve a rule. Right. That's not what we contemplated. So that's been the hard part of it. I can't compliment Lisa Lazarus enough for the almost impossible job that she's doing. And I interact with the people at HISA and HIWU every day. They know what their mandate is. They are sensitive to industry concerns. They listen to me. I don't always, I'm not always successful in what I ask for, but, that to have the opportunity to do that, continue to talk to them is, I think, critically important for the industry. And I know, and John knows from the THA perspective, we're at the table with them. They come to our meetings. We talk to them. We express our concerns. We talk to them about what's happening on the backstretch, what horsemen are telling us, what we think is working, what is not working, how we can make it better. And has always been our position is it's better to be at the table than to be trying to fight this process. Because let's assume that the opponents of HISA are successful. What are we going to do? Where is this industry going to go? And is that going to be good or bad for the industry? And, I would rather be working within a system, trying to make it better. And in a lot of respects, what's happening with HIWU and HISA is not terribly different than what we had before. It's just uniform. It's transparent. And everybody, we're all trying to, I know, are trying to get to the right place. And there are changes that still need to be made. And we'll work through that. It's still a young program.
Alan, can't thank you enough for the time and the expertise. We'd love to have you on retainer, not as a lawyer, but to explain these things to us.
Steve Bick does with me. I'm on. Yeah. Steve wanted me this morning. I said, Steve, I'm slammed all day. He said, can I have you tomorrow morning? So I'll be on Steve tomorrow morning. And
we got to get this show out to beat Steve.
You were here first. You were here first, which is all the most important.
It's a good opportunity to get some of this stuff out there so people can understand what's going on.
Yeah, no doubt. And nobody does it better than you. So thank you for the time and keep up the great work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm available anytime. And you're doing a great job. I love the podcast. I really do. I told John that.
We like to think we're the Alan Foreman of podcasters.
Let's not go crazy, John. Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. There's one reason they're #1. No other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. We heard earlier in the show ad nauseum about DJ Stable's success on the racetrack, but it is very impressive, even from just a impartial bystanders and observers perspective. DJ wins big races, seems every week, every weekend at least. And obviously Len knows how to pick out good horse flesh. The other thing he knows how to do, save people in the horse business money and save them taxes And that's why they have over 1,000 clients, or almost 1,000 clients in the horse business at the Green Group. And there's a special offer for listeners of Rail Talk. Len's offering you a complimentary, confidential half-hour consultation, guaranteeing you'll get value. Call him up. And what's that number again, Michael?
732-634-5100. Green Group.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I never get tired of it. And do it before year end so he can prove to you that he'll save you taxes, but you don't have to take it from me. Take it from yet another satisfied customer in the horse industry. Eclipse Award winner training. What's it? How would I say it if she trained an Eclipse Award winner?
Yes, Jenna Antonucci.
We swapped over recently, and it's been great, work with him and the team and to really just deep dive things and assess to make sure we're making the right moves. And it's great to be able to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. How would you like me to handle these things? So important to be comfortable. We're talking about managing things that are life and real things. And sometimes we can get a little lost in the make-believe of horse land. So trying to make good long-term decisions and knowing that and having that confidence in the team you're dealing with is important.
Thank you, Jenna Antonucci, who trained, as we all remember, Eclipse Award winner Arcangelo last year. Len guarantees he will find you value and savings. Hit him up at 732-634-5100 or go to greenco.com. Okay, so there was some big other news on Saturday beyond the wedding. Apparently there was some racing happening. They didn't cancel the entire racing schedule just for me.
They pretty much did in the States, just not in Canada.
Right. I thought I had that kind of pull in this industry. I guess I got to work harder. But no, the big day was Saturday at Woodbine. I know John is a big fan of this card with the Natalma in the summer and the Woodbine Mile, and you guys had some good results that we'll get to in a second. Just want to go over some of the winners. One of the things I liked, and I didn't really dig into the races too much, but it was mostly local guys, Mark Cassie and Kevin Attard winning these races, and Robert Tiller won in the Vigil Stakes. Patches O'Houlihan. So I like that. I like because a lot of times you see these European barns raid in and just take all the candy. There was one European winner for Andrew Balding, the Summer Stakes winner, New Century. But yeah, it was really the home team that really put the numbers on the board on Saturday. John, what stuck out to you about Woodbine Mile Day?
Well, DJ Stable had a day, Joe. I mean, it wasn't quite being married, but it was definitely a big day. Our homebred Nitrogen, who was still a maiden, ran third in the Grade 1 and almost stole it from Gate the Wire. She was passed at the very end by Mark Cassie entry mates and One More Time, who's a $750,000 Fasig-Tipton grad. Omaha Beach daughter, who won the Natalma, and then we ran second with Vixen, who is a Vacoma, and we were very happy to finish second and third. Have two fillies that are both Grade 1 place now, and then Joe, we had Dream On, finish third in the Summer Stake, which is also a Grade 1, and he punched his ticket to run hopefully in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. So we may have those three horses, plus a week from Saturday, we will have Shifty run in the Miss Grillo. And we'll see how that comes out. But right now we have three horses that have points to get into their respective turf juvenile division races. And Johnny V is going to ride Dream On in the Breeders' Cup Turf, and he's committed to stay on Vixen for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly. So nothing wrong with having a Hall of Fame trainer and having a Hall of Fame jockey piloting your horses in the first weekend of November.
And there's nothing wrong with you completely talking about yourself when I ask you what stuck out to you about Woodbine Mile today.
I just wanted to sing. That's all. I mean, that was okay. If we haven't lost you by now, then you are a hardcore fan.
I mean, you also, if you're a hardcore fan, you know the fucking deal on this show.
But yeah, no, I think there were a couple other Grade 1 races, going on in Canada, but I can't attest to them. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that's the last time I ask you to carry me on the racing results for the weekend. But another couple of things I just wanted to mention. Jonathan's Way was pretty impressive in the Iroquois. I thought he was the best 2-year-old I saw at Saratoga all summer, and he did it again, stretched out. The freaking Vacomas just runners left and right. And the other thing, just jumping back to Woodbine for a second, I'm sensing like a little bit of a pattern, and maybe this will be completely proven wrong in the next month or two as we go closer to the Breeders' Cup. I don't feel like these Charlie Appleby horses are running out of their skin the way they used to.
Right.
Like he used to ship in for that card and just win everything. He would win everything at Saratoga. He had some horses that bombed at short prices at Saratoga all summer. He's obviously still a top-notch trainer in Europe, but there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, I would say like 4 or 5 months ago, where he was just an auto include every single time, no matter who the horse was, no matter how hopeless, relatively speaking, they looked on paper. And it just seems like the kryptonite has kind of set in a little bit on the Charlie Appleby operation, where I don't know if he's not sending the right horses now. And he obviously is still dangerous if he's got the right horse. But that's just something I noticed the last couple of months, that his horses are still getting bet like they're unbeatable, and they have become increasingly beatable.
I think, Joe, it comes down to the statistics. I mean, my grandfather used to always say to me, look at the back of the baseball card, and eventually things will kind of settle out there. You know, like Mark Cassidy's having a great summer, and I don't wish this on him, but he's winning at a 20% clip. But he's a career 16, 17%. Trainer. So he's going to run into a lull. I think that's kind of happening now. We expected Appleby to win at like a 50% clip, like what he was doing, the past couple of years. And now he's bringing over horses, and they're running, but they're not running at the 3 to 5 mark like they should be. He did finish second in the colt race with a horse named Al Quadra. So he did actually hit the board, but yeah, I would agree with the sentiment that like his horses are starting to come back to the pack now. And that's a big ask also, to have horses go from Europe, come to North America. There's a quarantine, period. They miss some training days. I know I get jet lagged, and when we make a 4 or 6 hour plane ride. So I would imagine these horses would also new surroundings, new environment. So I kind of give them a pass, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised though if when they run out in California, they start running back to form and out of their skin. But yeah, they don't deserve to be the 3 to 5s just based on their past history or the former horses that he had training, because they're literally not the same horses.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you said, it's like reversion to the mean a little bit, but it's a good point that you make about the jet lag, because he was kind of groundbreaking in that he ships horses in to go after all sorts of American turf races. It used to be the European trainers, they would come in for the Breeders' Cup, maybe one other race, maybe like the Arlington Million, something like that. And in the case of the Breeders' Cup, they ship them in. They have like a couple of weeks to acclimate and train and like then be able to fire their best shot in the Breeders' Cup. That's what was like so shocking to me about how well his horses were running. Like he would ship them in like a week before like the Fort Marcy or some shit like that, and they would go win off by like 8 lengths. And it was like, how is this happening?
Yep.
And yeah, far be it from me to like question how it's kind of fallen off a little bit. But yeah, like he was one of the first to kind of start rating for those other non-Breeders' Cup races. And I would like to see more of it, honestly. I see more of the Europeans coming in for a Kentucky Downs and the Saratoga Derby and the Belmont Derby and stuff like that. We need new blood in this, in this business with the 5 and 6 horse fields that we see in America. Any European trainers want to come take our cookies? Well, you're free to do it. Charlie Appleby doesn't need to be the only one.
I don't want Europeans coming in and taking my cookies. I like eating my cookies very much. I don't need other people to come in. I mean, from a dietary standpoint, yeah, I get it.
Yes,
they shouldn't. They
only an even number of cookies, right?
Even numbered. You remember that? Yes, that is a weird OCD issue that I have. That I can only eat an even number of M&Ms, string beans, pieces of popcorn. Like that's what actually goes through my head as I'm eating. Was that an even number or an odd number? Even number, odd number. Like that's yes. It's exhausting.
It's a horrifying trip into the mind of Johnny Green. Rail Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade. TaylorMade obviously very busy with the September sale going on right now. They've been near the top of the list at every single session pretty much with the huge consignment. And then, we always say this, but just because they have a huge consignment doesn't mean they don't have the attention to detail that it takes to be able to get all of these horses through the ring, because they have a great team and they treat every horse and every client as if it's the most important horse in the barn. You can't put on the kind of show at these sales that they do without having that attention to detail. So shout out to everybody at TaylorMade. I also wanted to mention TaylorMade Stallions. We talked about this before, but Tacitus, I think, was a great bargain at $10,000, and I think his fee is going to go up as the sales results and the racetrack results start to follow. We bought one. West Point bought one at the New York Bred Sale, and we bought one last week, who's actually going to be trained by Bill Mott. West Point hasn't had a horse with Bill Mott in ages, and now we're going to have one with him because obviously Bill Mott trained Tacitus, who won over $3.6 million on the racetrack. Never got that grade 1, but man, was he a runner. In every single big race, he showed up, was either first, second, or third over and over again. So yeah, really excited about that Tacitus colt. And John, I think you guys got one too.
We got a Tacitus colt yesterday, as a matter of fact, for $75,000, and we also bought not this time earlier on in the sale, Joe. And the other thing I can say, aside from their stallions, you mentioned already what a great job they do selling horses. They went 100% sold for us. We had a bunch of yearlings sold, entered in the yearling sale with TaylorMade. Jeff Hazel and his team made sure that not only did they sell, but they sold for well over the reserve. So people come to TaylorMade to buy good horses. They know that that's the source place for good horses. And, we couldn't be happier selling with them. We have some yearlings that we bought out of the sale that are now, going to be resting and relaxing at the beautiful farm of TaylorMade and before they head down to Florida. So they are just doing everything right as far as we're concerned. And I can't recommend them any higher than we already did.
So it says here we're supposed to preview the Pennsylvania Derby card. Do we have to? I guess we got to. Like these are $1 million grade 1 races. First thought on the Pennsylvania Derby, big field, very, very low quality for $1 million grade 1. We got a 9-5 favorite in Dragoon Guard, who has never run higher than a 91 buyer. So I don't know where all the other 3-year-olds are that could have been favored in this race. Now, to be fair, he has looked better than those figures suggest in those races, but he was also winning the Indiana Derby and the West Virginia Derby. This is supposed to be a step up from that. I guess honestly, the morning line is like a little faulty, I think, because Unmatched Wisdom is 8-1. Like, in what universe is that horse going to be 8-1 for Chad Brown? Just looking through the rest of the field, like no other real big name. Seize the Gray is the only other one that might attract some attention just based on name recognition.
Right.
Stronghold is somehow 5-2 on the outside for Phil DeMott. This morning line makes no sense to me. To me, the bigger headliner obviously is Torpedo Anna in the Cotillion. Now she's 4-5 morning line. She's going to be 1-20 in this race. Like if there were ever a horse to make 1-5 morning line, like I'm assuming they won't allow show wagering in that race because this is going to be the bridge jump of all bridge jump opportunities here. If that's your jam. She's obviously the star of the show on Saturday. John, you have some thoughts?
Well, I thought it was.
There's no DJ stable horses, I don't think.
No.
We're not. You got to talk about somebody else.
Even for $1 million, we still wouldn't run horses at parks. But that being said, yeah, it's the Torpedo Anna show, and we're just all kind of there to watch. And she could bounce by 20, 25 points, buyer numbers, and still win this race, handily. I thought it was interesting that even there was an article that said, 8 take on Torpedo Anna, and that was, that's like the big article that there were 8 horses that were brave enough. Actually, there were 9 horses that were brave enough, and Parks refused entry on a horse in the Cotillion by the name of Molly Malone, who lost 12 races of 14 and she lost those races by an average of 12.5 lengths. And that does not include a race that she was eased. So Parks, to their credit, actually said, we're not going to accept this entry of Molly Malone. They did something also. They refused an entry for Cary Grant, who's a horse that was going to run in the PA Derby. He was still a maiden, and they refused the entry on both because the owner was quoted as saying he was motivated to run the horses in their respective races because even last place finishes would net out about $19,000. So his thought was, hey, this is a good business investment. Instead of breezing the horse in the morning, I'll run it in the afternoon. And as long as it beats the ambulance to the finish line, I'll get 19 grand. Not exactly the way that I would look at it. We've seen horses that have run, in races and, not only have been eased, but have been in very critical scenarios because they don't know. They're trying to keep up with the rest of the pack. And that's their instinct. And if they can't, they push themselves too far. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So in that case, kudos to Parks for refusing entries on those 2 horses. Now, that being said, they also could have done the same thing with the Greenwood Cup, otherwise known as next race, because quite frankly, he's going to be 1-20 in that race. And Joe, when I tell you that there are 9 horses competing as next, I use that very liberally when I say competing, because really there's only 3 horses in here that can even give him a sniff of what's going on. Magic Michael, Dave Vernon, and Riding with Biden. The other horses in the race, you have a New Jersey bred mare that's a sprinter. Treble Clef that hasn't run since July, hasn't won since May. There's a $10,000 claimer. There's a horse, My Imagination, that hasn't run in 6 months. And Modern Era, who has 1 win in 21 starts. And then Saigu Star, the outside horse, who, Joe, in July 1st, for a whopping $5,000, you could have claimed him out of a claiming race at Parks. And his last race, when they ran him in this prep, he was, quote unquote, always outrun at 40-1 and lost by 14 lengths. So good for Parks for not accepting the blatant obvious, only because the owner said, yeah, of course I'm going to run this race because I can get $19,000. But they let 9 horses run against Next, of which really, other than save 3, maybe 4 of them, wouldn't even be favorites in a $15,000-$16,000 claiming race.
Yeah, I mean, there's a push and pull thing for me because I can't sit up here and complain about the short fields and then also say, like, look at all these bum horses that are in this race. Second still pays. So I want to separate that from what you're saying, which I totally agree with, that like if someone's stupid enough to say out loud, I'm running this horse knowing they're going to run last just because I'm going to cash that check for 19 grand,
yep.
Then yes, their entries should be banned. Luch was kind of like that. Remember Luch would would always run these like overmatched horses in these races and like, right. Then he pops up and wins one every once in a while. He's like,
that was the problem.
Luch wasn't dumb enough to say out loud, right. I know my horse is going to get his head beat in, and I'm going to do it anyway. So
right.
Yeah, I mean that's kudos to them.
Do you mean alleged inmate number 15348? Is that who you're referring to? I'm sorry. Keep going, please. Go with your rant. Yes.
Until you've walked a mile in a man's shoes.
That's
Who
right.
are you?
But yes, but Parks needed to have the, and again, maybe it's from a legal standpoint that they don't have the ability to disregard entries unless somebody else says, oh yeah, I know I'm running last and that's why I'm doing this. I just don't, I understand it, but I would love to see whether or not the Greenwood Cup goes from a grade 3 to a listed stake next year. Even if Next wins and then Next wins the marathon, the Breeders' Cup Marathon, I would love to see what the rating is, because if it's supposed to be on the totality of the entries for 3 or 2 consecutive years, you got to look at it and go, unless a couple of these horses get scratched and don't actually run, their next races are going to be, for never win 2 lifetimes.
Yeah. There's a couple other things. I don't want to sell Power Squeeze short. She is in the cotillion. She's a nice horse. She just is not in the same ballpark as Torpedo Anna. So I don't want to say it's all tomato cans running against her because she's nice. Mystic Lake is okay. I will say the PA Derby is a good betting race. Quality wise, it's not that great for $1 million, but there's a lot of cases to be made for a lot of horses in there. And on a card where it looks otherwise pretty chalky with Next and Torpedo Anna, and I think the Phil D'Amato horse is going to be very, very tough in the Gallant Bob. That's one race you could at least spread in and hope for a little chaos. Last thing I'll say about this card is I'm praying for those horses in a turf stakes. Like I just am very naturally worried based on the reports of the turf course. It sounds like they've done a little bit of maintenance to make it better and safer. So I just hope we don't have any incidents on that grass course, because that's obviously going to be a tragedy and a terrible look if we do. And so hopefully everybody comes home safely from the grass racing. Real Talk is sponsored by Facing Tipton. Facing Tipton's got a sale that West Point will be at next week. The California Fall Yearlings in Pomona. Nice chance to get some Cal bred and just Cal-based horses. We got a nice one that I think is going to start soon at Santa Anita, so we'll be there. It's definitely a good like kind of boutique sale for area of the country that kind of is underserved, I think, in that way. And it's great that they put that on every year. September 24th, next Tuesday, is the date for the California Fall Yearlings. After that, October 1st, the Mid-Atlantic Fall Yearlings. And then the October digital sale. Entries are still open. The sale goes October 3rd through the 8th. Entries close September 25th next week. And John, sounds like you guys are going to have some action in that catalog.
Joe, I spoke to Anna Seitz yesterday about our potential entries, and we're going to have at least 12, maybe up to 14 horses horses in the digital sale. That platform has just been such a godsend for us, both on the buy and the sell side. And you know what? Kudos to the rest of the industry, because there have been some DJ stable graduates off that platform that have gone on to win races and win stake races. So it's a win-win for everybody. We bought 19 horses at the most recent yearling sale, so we have to unload fast on some of these horses. They're 30% off, 40% off, 50% off. Get them while they're hot.
Let's go.
But yeah, definitely we enjoy the digital platform. I think Fasig-Tipton is the leader in that division. Very easily, one would say they're the Torpedo Anna of digital sales, because they just don't have anybody who's competition with them. Maybe they're all running for last place, hoping to get that money. But at the end of the day, we have a bunch of horses going into the Fasig sale. And Joe, we also have 6 horses that we've identified early on for this October sale, because maybe they were a little bit later developing. Maybe we just wanted to give them a little extra time. But we have 6 DJ stable yearlings that'll be in the October sale. And what I didn't realize until I spoke to Anna about it is that they actually have a pretty good contingent number of horses that are, came out of the Saratoga sale. So you have Saratoga pedigrees, Saratoga physiques, and for whatever reason, the horses got sick or weren't quite up to what they thought they were going to be, and were RNAs. But there are some great horses to be found at this October yearling sale right there in Lexington, Kentucky.
Yeah, no, to me, that and the July sale are the 2 most underrated sales on the calendar in terms of finding a nice horse usually for a decent price. I think when we talk about Torpedo Anna in this segment, we have to call her Torpedo Anna, right?
I think so. You're right, in honor. And she also is a Fasig grad.
Yep. Shout out to Anna Seitz and the whole team at Fasig-Tipton. So in case you haven't heard, because I haven't mentioned it enough, I got married this past Saturday, and our own Patricia Wolf was in attendance and shot some great video, as she always does, because she's a video production savant. And Julia Agresta, our associate producer, did a great job putting it together. So we have a little montage of some of the most beautiful scenes from my wedding to the love of my life, Megan. And if you're listening to this on the audio version, obviously we're not going to play it for you. You got to go to the video version on YouTube and check it out, which you should be doing anyway, because you definitely want to see our beautiful faces every single week. Well, I mean, it's a prerequisite for being a Rail Talk fan. But no, seriously, go check it out if you're on the audio version. And if you're on the video version, enjoy watching some of the best day of my life.
You've been through some things together, with trunks of memories still to come. You found things to do in stormy weather. Long may you run. Long may you run. Long may you run. So many good things still to come. With your 2 hearts joined now together as one. Long may you run. It was a teenage wedding in the older bush bushman well. 700 little records, all rock, rhythm, and jazz. But when the sun went down, the rapid tempo of the music fell. C'est la vie, say the old folks. It goes to show you never can tell. They bought a souped up jitney, was a cherry red 53. You know what a jitney is? Oh. They drove it down to Orleans to celebrate the anniversary. C'est la vie, say the old folks. It goes to show you never can tell.
Joe, before we do the closing wrap and credits, I just have to do a quick shout out to our number one fan, Skip Anderson, who drove like 17 hours, Joe, 17 hours straight, he said, stopping for gas, food, and wee-wees, and got to Keeneland, spent the whole day at Keeneland, went to sleep, came back the next day, bid on a couple of horses with us. You'll see a photo of him with my dad smiling after the hammer went down on a Quality Road filly that we bought, and then got in the car and drove back home 17 hours just to make it home for the weekend so he could spend time with his beautiful bride and daughter, Wynn. So, Skip Anderson, I salute you.
Steven, you're the best, man. I'm so glad that picture made me so happy and so warm and fuzzy inside when you sent it to the group chat. So as always, shout out to Skip. You are the man. And thank you to Alan Foreman for stopping by and explaining some of the legal mumbo jumbo to us that we generally need every once in a while on this podcast. Thank you to our producer, Patty Wolf. Thank you to our associate producers, Julia Gresta and Nathan Wilkinson. Shout out to the sponsors. Shout out to you for tuning in. And we'll see you back here next week on Rail Talk.